Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and this evening we're joined by Andrew Klavan. He's a novelist, a political commentator, a culture warrior, and we have him tonight. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
So you have a very varied background, and so give us a little bit of the scoop on who you are and how you got here, not by plane, but life in general.
Yeah, well, all I ever wanted to be was a novelist. I grew up reading the great crime novelists like Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, James M. Cain, the great American tough guys, and that's kind of what I wanted to, the stuff I wanted to write. And I did quite well at it. I was a multi-award winning novelist. My books were made into movies with Clint Eastwood and Michael Douglas, and it went rather well, and I eventually started to move into movies as well and was writing for the movies. But at the same time, I was going through a very big personal shift. I not only became a Christian, I also separately became a conservative. I became a conservative when I saw that Ronald Reagan basically was right about everything. And I very rapidly found that it's almost impossible to maintain a career in Hollywood while being openly conservative.
And Christian to top?
And Christian on top of it, yeah.
Living on the edge.
I know, it was like 4 strikes and you're out, you know. And so I started to do other things. I mean, I started to move in. I saw the new media. I was very excited by the new media, and I started to move into that too. And I started to do YouTube satires, and they did extremely well because I was satirizing the left, and nobody was making fun of the left. All the comedians were on the right. I mean, all the comedians were on the left, and nobody was making fun of the left. So I started doing that, and my YouTube videos were getting hundreds of thousands of hits, and that became almost a second career. And so political commentary of a certain kind of satirical kind has become another career. Now I have a podcast on the Daily Wire, and I'm doing all kinds of things in different media, as well as I'm still a novelist. Yeah.
So is it hard to stay thin while wearing a bulletproof vest? The look on camera, it puts weight on us, but if you're afraid you're going to be assassinated.
They don't have to assassinate you, they just erase you, kind of.
You don't exist. Why would we shoot you?
That's right.
All right. So, but that's interesting, and so I'm sure that you've experienced plenty of backlash in your career.
Oh yeah. I mean, what happened? I mean, I write crime stories, suspense stories, and I write a little bit of ghost kind of supernatural stuff. And after The Ring came out, which was a very popular ghost story in a movie I loved, I started to do a very good business in ghost scripts. You know, they were very popular for a while, and I read every ghost story ever. So I was selling a lot of scripts in a year, which is a very good living. At the same time, 9/11 happened, and we started to go to war. And Hollywood started to do what I think is the lowest point Hollywood has ever hit. It started to make anti-war films while our soldiers were in the field. So that never happened before. You think of the great anti-Vietnam War films, they were all made after the soldiers had come home. And I just found that deeply, deeply offensive. I thought if you're opposed to the war, that's fine, it's a free country, but you don't make propaganda films that hurt your guys while they're actually under fire, because you're not under fire. You're sitting at the Cafe Marmont in LA, kind of tossing back espressos. Keep your opinions off the screen. So I started to write about it. I wrote for the LA Times. I actually went to Afghanistan and reported on the troops for City Journal. And my phone started to stop ringing. I mean, it basically stopped ringing. It got harder and harder for me to sell things. It got harder and harder for me to go into a room and talk to the people that you have to sell to. So the way it works in Hollywood is you pitch things. You go and you say, here's my idea, or they say to you, here's our property, what would you do with it? And of course, you would go in and you'd make conversation, as you do in any meeting, and the conversation would be, isn't that George W. Bush a Nazi? And I live my life by words. My words are my profession and my life, and I can't lie. I can be polite. I hope I am polite, but I can't sit there and say, yes, George W. Bush is a Nazi. So I would say, I kind of see this differently. And I'd be out in the parking lot before the door hit me in the backside.
Right.
And,
but no one heard you weeping as well, with the door closed and the bruises behind.
I have to be honest with you. I lost a lot of income. I did. I lost a substantial amount of income. It never bothered me once. I have to say, I never lost a minute's sleep over it, because guys were being shot. Because guys were fighting for our freedom and fighting against, I think, a vicious, low enemy in these Islamist killers who are out there. Mm-hmm. And I thought, like, so you're losing some screenwriting jobs. It would have just struck me as almost bad form, bad taste to get upset about that. And, you know, I pushed on.
But as a culture warrior, it's almost one of those things that you could wear as a badge of honor later. It's like, you tried to take me down, but I survived. And I won.
Not only that. I mean, first of all, it is a niche. There's just not that many people who do what I do from my point of view. So that's kind of nice. And the other thing is this explosion of new media. I've always loved doing new things. I mean, even when I would write, one of the things reviewers have always said about me is, boy, he always tries something new. It's always a different thing. And this new media was just so exciting to me. So, for instance, I wrote with my friend Neil Edelstein, who was a film producer. We created a movie in an app. So you would press the app on your iPad, and every 2 days, another 15 minutes of this ghost story would come over your iPad. I think I can brag that I helped create the kind of satire, political satire, that's become very big on YouTube, working at PJTV when it was just starting out. And even now, I've got this year for the first time, I put one of my novels out as a serial podcast. It's called Another Kingdom, and it's on iTunes. And every week you get about a half hour to 40 minutes of this episode, and it's coming to an end. And it's got over 200,000 downloads. I mean, it's a big hit, and that's just so exciting to me, because it's kind of like, it reminds me. I always used to call the left and their media the empire of lies, and so it reminds me of the Revolutionary War. You know, they're coming in with their empire, and we're kind of taking pot shots at them from behind the trees, and I think we're starting to win.
Or the rebels strike back in a Star Wars kind of context, right?
Exactly.
Going against the dark side.
And it's exciting, and a lot of the people doing it are much younger than I am, which is also exciting. To have been sort of have a little bit of cordite on my clothes, and be able to talk to them about where they're going with it. It's actually been an adventure, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
So I just want to clarify, when you talk about ghost stories and ghost writing, you're talking about supernatural ghosts versus you can't sign your name to anything anymore and still get a paycheck.
Yeah, no, I've never done that. I've never. It's, you don't really get blacklisted in Hollywood. You get graylisted. So I've never had to do what the leftist guys did in the 50s when they, were chased out by the House Un-American Activities Committee. They had to do things like write under pseudonyms. I've never tried that. I might one day, because I really have become toxic. And what happens to me now in Hollywood is I will get invited in for a meeting, and then after that they'll Google me, and they'll see what the kinds of things I say.
Oh crap, cancel that guest?
Yeah. And that'll...
Well, you'll know you've arrived when there's a sticker that they put on the side of tanker trucks with your face on it instead of a biohazard kind of a sticker.
That's not too
Mr. Klavan, toxic, avoid. So, are conservatives allowed to write about ghosts and things of the supernatural? Because isn't that more the new age leftist kind of content?
It's a hard sell. I mean, conservatives by nature...
Are they well-behaved ghosts? What happens with a conservative ghost? This is what I'm curious about.
Well, conservatives by nature are a little bit wary of the culture. First of all, they've been beaten up by it for so long. But secondly, it's in the nature of being a conservative to always be worried that any social change is going to lead to disaster. So it's not like, one person's in favor of gay marriage and the other person's against it. Conservatives think that if gay marriage comes, marriage will be destroyed, a pillar of society will fall, all society will collapse, and everyone will die. That's a basic conservative way of thinking. And so they don't realize that the way the culture works, the culture doesn't sell you something like you watch a movie and you say, I want to be a more patriotic American. That's not the way the culture works. The culture surrounds you kind of like an atmosphere, and you breathe it in, and 20 years later, you find that opinions have shifted a little bit, and people are starting to think things that they weren't allowed to think before because they've entered into the culture. Conservatives don't have time for that. They always really think that that we want to get to the facts. We want to know the fact. If I get up there, you ever watch Paul Ryan try to sell a bill? He's got the charts and he points at things, and you start to fall over and fall asleep. Where the left will get up and they'll tell a story.
Or they'll bring the crippled minority in that was nearly run down by Trump.
When they were selling us Hillary Clinton for years before that, we started to see female characters appear. Remember, Madam Secretary was on TV. They just were a little slow. If they had been doing it about 20 years earlier, they might have gotten away with it. But characters who looked a lot like Hillary Clinton were suddenly appearing on TV in positions of power.
That scares me, actually. They look like Hillary.
Yeah, it was frightening. But take a look at the TV show, Madam Secretary. She's Secretary of State. She looks just like Hillary Clinton. She's making all these decisions, saving the world, and that was set up in anticipation of Hillary Clinton's run. They are very good about this. We're not. And they won't let us in, and we don't build our own venues.
So talk to me about that, because that is, we were talking a little bit before the show about conservatives are very slow on realizing that the rest of society is not necessarily just analytical and rules-based. They are wooed by emotion. They want to feel good about things. They want to smash the crap out of people who don't feel the same about them in the name of tolerance. Right? How does that shift? Because there are certain filmmakers, for example, that have started to realize this, but it's a very small niche.
Right. You know, Christopher Nolan, the great director of the Batman, the Dark Knight trilogy, and he just made Dunkirk, is clearly a conservative. He's never given an interview to that effect, but you watch his movies and it's very clear. When he first made the first Batman, the first Dark Knight film, I wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal saying the Dark Knight is obviously George W. Bush. You know, the Batman in this film is fighting terrorists, and he's obviously, and everybody hates him, and he has to spy on people sometimes, and he has to do things that are a little bit dicey, but they're for the good of the country. He's obviously George W. Bush. That article was the #1 article on the internet. I mean, on the entire internet for that day. I was getting a piece of hate mail every 3 seconds. In my personal account, my wife was standing over my shoulder just going, what on earth is going on? Well, why? Why did they react? And she told me, by the way, when she read the piece, she said, they're going to kill you for this. I said, me, who everyone loves? Why do they?
Mail bombs.
Yeah. But it was amazing. Why? Because they basically consider the culture belongs to them. And the fact that I would say this guy is obviously making a conservative film, and when the sequel came out and became really obvious, people would even call me up and say, yeah, you were right, you son of a gun, you know. They understand the importance of this. They understand how much this matters, and we don't. We don't get it, and we always think we've got to stop that bill. If Obamacare passes, the country is done. If gay marriage passes, the country is done. If this happens, the country is done. You know, it's always an emergency, and we're always rushing off at the last minute to pour all our money into some congressional race in Ohio because that's what matters. And we never say, you know what? Maybe we ought to build a film studio. Maybe if Fox News is so successful, there ought to be 2 Fox Newses. Maybe there ought to be a Fox News for young people. Maybe there ought to be a Fox Comedy Central. We never say it. And it's just amazing because every time they do it, it works like gangbusters. Because
there's a hole that needs to be filled.
That's
but the real taboo that you touched upon was you called a conservative a superhero. And that is just not okay.
Well, that too. He was the good guy. You know, I always used to say if Batman had taken his mask off and they'd seen he was George W. Bush, they wouldn't have gone to the movie at all. You know,
they would have stopped. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we make movies. It is interesting. One of the monopolies that the left has in the culture is rewriting history. So
absolutely.
So JFK was a staunch Cold War anti-communist who was killed by a communist. That's the story. A communist killed an anti-communist president. That's what happened. So the left spun this into a conspiracy theory and ultimately made Oliver Stone's picture JFK. I think it was Oscar nominated. I don't think it won, but it was a huge, and that's what most people know about the JFK assassination, that it was a conservative conspiracy among people trying to keep the Vietnam War going so that to feed the military-industrial complex. You know, and that's how they win history after history is actually over.
Well, or they can just completely fabricate something. One of the most popularly quoted things on the left is Sarah Palin and her being able to see Russia from her house. And it was a Saturday Night Live skit, but it becomes truth because it's repeated often enough, and it's cool to believe that that's the truth.
And so, a perfect example.
So this is where we are.
And Argo was another one, the one about the hostages in Iran, in Iraq, I guess. I'm sorry, the Shah of Iran. It was in Iran, and the guy who goes over and negotiates and helps them escape. And conservatives loved that movie because it had an American hero. Watch that movie carefully. It basically rewrites history so that Jimmy Carter is a statesman-like, wise leader instead of the complete incompetent and kind of a cowardly leader that he was. They even cut out the disastrous rescue mission that Carter approved where people died in a helicopter crash. They cut all that out and they rewrite history to make the Jimmy Carter administration look like the good guys when they were really incompetent fools. And they also, if you listen to the narrative, they blame us for the problems of Iran. They blame us for the Islamic revolution in Iran. They do it all the time. And it's Ben Affleck. He's in charge of it. He's a liberal guy, and that's what they're going to do. And we cheer them on. We pay for their propaganda. Avatar, another film, a complete attack on our military. The Avatar, the innocent aliens are really the innocent Muslims overseas. We pay them millions of dollars to go and see their propaganda, and we don't answer it at all.
So what is the solution? Well, how do you, if you were to answer, I mean, you're talking crazy, things like Fox Comedy Central. Yeah. I mean, what does that mean? That there are going to be attractive women presenting the comedy? I mean, what is that?
Well, no, it means you make fun of the left. I mean, when you turn on Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel or any one of the, name it, Samantha Bee, whoever is doing late night comedy, they are making fun of us. Every day. And every day, that the effect that has on the millennial generation, who are the people who are watching these guys, the effect that has is to make it uncool to be us. So,
and they're using that as their news source.
That's right. That's right. And Jon Stewart, Jon Stewart had an audience of about 1 million people. That's not that much. But they have this infrastructure with which to blow that up by putting him on the cover of magazines, by saying what a big deal. Lena Dunham had virtually no audience. That show Girls on HBO, I think at its best it had a 600,000 audience, which in TV is zero. I mean, it's like a statistically nothing.
Rounding error.
But every single newspaper, if you go back and look at the reviews, this show is a hit. It's a hit. And when I went to New York and you traveled in that little square in Manhattan where everybody lives, they was, oh, it's huge. It's really having a big effect. And I would say to them, nobody's watching it. Nobody cares about it. One of the reasons Lena Dunham is going nuts is because when the show went off the air, she realized nobody knew who she was. It's only the left talking to itself, but they have a way of blowing things up. We don't do any of that. And so when you ask what the answer is, the answer, unfortunately or fortunately, is going to have to be a conservative answer. It's going to have to be an answer that suits conservatives. That means it's going to have to be individualistic. It's going to have to be rebellious. It's going to have to be guys working like I work in any media you can get your hands on, fighting back, reaching people where they can't get to us. And eventually, I actually think it's happening now as we're talking. I believe this revolution, there's a turning point coming. We can't let up, but it is coming. Where we start to become the voice of the resistance, essentially. They call themselves the resistance, but they've had the government for 8 years and didn't do much with it. We are actually the rebellious voice, and that has a lot of weight with young people. It has a lot of weight with people who just have thought that something was wrong for so long. But they didn't quite know what and why.
Or they were afraid to say if they did know.
They're afraid to say it, afraid to think it. When I wrote a script for a movie about an abortion murderer who was also an abortionist, which may be
that's redundant.
Yeah. I mean that way. But he was a serial killer. He delivered babies and then killed them afterwards, and the press just didn't cover it. And when I went to interview the DA who prosecuted it, she said when the men would get in the jury for voir dire and she would ask them whether they approved of abortion, every single one of them said, well, it's up to women. I thought, why? Some of the children who are dying are male. Why? You have as much right to talk about it as anybody else. But they had been so cowed that they couldn't even say it, and God knows once you can't say it, you can't think it either, really. So I think that's what has to break. That's what we have to break.
But some would argue, okay, well, there are Christian filmmakers that are starting to get real traction. Do you have a problem with that?
The Christians wisely started to do exactly some of the things that I'm talking about. They started building programs. There's some excellent programs like Act One, and where they teach screenwriters how to tell a story. And they tell them, don't preach, tell a story. The problem is, and it's a kind of circular problem, is that Christians want their art to look like them. See, the trick about...
Like them or like the ideal them?
Well, like the ideal them, right. So they don't want any cursing, they don't want any sex. If anybody has sex, they have to get pregnant, and then it has to become
But it has to be in wedlock also.
Well, you can have sex out of wedlock as long as you get pregnant or get a disease, and they don't want it to look like life. And I always say to them, God is God of the real world. He's not the God of Candyland.
He's seen it all.
Yeah, he's seen it all. He knows what's going on. But they do this to me. I mean, I'm an open Christian. I've written a book about it, and I get email. You call yourself a Christian, but you curse. And I always say I don't curse. My characters curse, and some of my characters are gangsters, and some of them are teenagers, and they talk like the people they are. Now, the problem with this is that the Christian audience turns up. And so if you make a movie in which somebody prays and everything goes right because he prayed, and the angel comes down and finds the bunny for the little girl, they will show up and you will make a fortune. And even if the acting is bad, the production value is bad, the whole thing costs 25 grand, you will make a fortune. So there's not a lot of capitalist incentive to sort of say to Christians, Christian art used to be the greatest art on earth. When
there were naked people in some of that Christian art,
yes, and when you look at that, I mean, to me, one of the greatest works of moral art in the last 30 years is The Sopranos. Take a look at The Sopranos.
Explain that, because you're going to get hate mail again after.
All the filthy language, all the sex, all the violence, all the bloodshed. Watch it carefully, and you will see that, there's one episode called From Where to Eternity or something like this, where Jesus is actually in the show. I mean, he actually performs a miracle in the show, and they ignore him because they're mobsters, and that's the whole point. There's one thing where they go to a Jewish psychiatrist, and the Jewish psychiatrist delivers Old Testament wisdom, and he says, it's the wife of the mobster, and he says, your husband is evil until you stop taking the money from the evil person. You will be evil. And he just delivers this Old Testament wisdom, and she's like, no. She just goes back to her life. And so that is
real life right there.
It is filled with that kind of wisdom and that kind of morality, but it's done in an entertaining way, because let's face it, it's entertaining to watch people shoot each other up. Here's the other thing about conservatives. They'll watch that if it's Shakespeare. They'll watch it if it's opera. They'll watch it if it was written 300 years ago. But if it's written today, they think it somehow soils them. And that's one of the problems you have breaking through.
But that's that whole ideal thing.
Yes.
Again,
yeah.
It's like what they do in their home is different than what they're going to do in public with the game face on, or the church face, we could say.
If they know you're a Christian artist, they'll come after you and they'll say you shouldn't curse, and then they'll go home and watch Game of Thrones.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, we've got just about a minute left. Mm-hmm. I know that there are people just waiting by their screens, hoping that they have a place to send hate mail. If people want to track you, either in subdued agreement, where they can quietly giggle in the privacy of their own home when not watching Thrones and things, or just to be able to shoot that hate mail to you, is there a website? Where can they find out about you?
Come to the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire is Ben Shapiro's website. I have a podcast there. You can hear me Monday through Thursday. I talk there. You can send me emails there. If you subscribe, you can send me questions, and I'll answer them on the show. And that's a good place. And I hope people will come and download Another Kingdom, which is an exciting fantasy suspense, and take a look at that too. That's on iTunes. But yeah, I'm easy to reach. AndrewKlavan.com. That comes right to my email. You can contact me through there. So I'm easy to find.
Okay, excellent. Well, I've enjoyed seeing you. I've known about you since watching you on PJ TV many years ago and that kind of thing, and it's been a pleasure just getting inside your mind a little bit more. And I even will be probably looking some things up to entertain myself as well.
I'll look forward to hearing from you. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if you'll hold on for just a moment, we'll be back after a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum.
Some people think that a meeting of conservatives in Silicon Valley could fit in a small room. In fact, when the Conservative Forum was founded in 2003, we did meet in a small room, a coffee shop in San Jose. It doesn't get more grassroots than this. It may surprise you that there are thousands of people right here in Silicon Valley who share your principles of liberty, free markets, and limited government. Since our humble beginnings in that coffee shop, we've outgrown 3 meeting halls. From San Jose to Gilroy to Mill Valley, we bring hundreds of people together each month from all over the Bay Area to promote the principles of American liberty. How do we do it? It starts with a stellar lineup of speakers. Speakers like Steve Forbes, Senator Jim DeMint, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Andrew Breitbart, Pamela Geller, and many others. These speakers passionately articulate our shared principles and remind us why conservatism isn't just the smart choice, it's also the moral choice. Our monthly meetings are only one dimension of the forum. We underwrite The Right Side, a monthly television show on cable access channel KMVT. We also host a monthly Constitution discussion group and provide tables at our meetings for more than a dozen local groups who share our love of liberty to promote their specific cause. The Conservative Forum is the premier place in Silicon Valley for conservatives to gather, become invigorated, motivated, and empowered. We welcome guests to our monthly meetings and offer special discounted pricing to first-time visitors. Take a look at our speaker lineup in the coming months and join us to learn why we say liberty is made in America.
And that was a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum. We have said for the last 6 seasons how much we appreciate them and their underwriting of the show. And when I walked in this evening, I wasn't sure if this was the last one, but they've renewed for another season. We are going to have a 7th. But what they're really known for is not for The Right Side, unfortunately, but hopefully soon. What they're known for is their speaker series, and that was why we were able to have Andrew on the show this evening. He'll actually be speaking there about the culture war, and dare I say, it's a Christmas party atmosphere this evening. But that'll be held at the IFES Portuguese Hall at 432 Stearland Road, just 3 minutes from here in Mountain View. In January, Lance Azumi, he's a Corrett Senior Fellow in Education Studies and the Senior Director of the Center for Education at the Pacific Research Institute. He'll be there. In February, Dr. Gary Wolfram, he's the William E. Simon Professor of Economics and Public Policy at Hillsdale College. He'll be speaking. And if you check the website, you'll find all sorts of upcoming speeches that will be of interest to you. And you can find that at theconservativeforum.com. I don't know about you, but I was extremely entertained in listening to Andrew and his thoughts on culture war and how we can address things and actually have conservative voices heard, although assassination attempts made, by just getting our views out there and things that are going to be more tolerable but real life for conservatives that will really hit a chord with people that half the country that's not represented. And so I encourage you to look for him out there in the wild, Andrew Klavan, spelled K-L-A-V-A-N, and find him, research him, throw flaming darts at him. And if you have any flaming darts left, we'd love to have them over here for even letting the man on the show. But we appreciate you joining us this evening and for the last 6 seasons. I've been your host, Chris Pareja. This has been The Right Side, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the air or in person sometime soon. But if you just can't wait, reach out to us at therightsidetv@gmail.com, and we'll take your flaming darts there. Thanks, and have a great night. And Merry Christmas.